The woman looked up from her station, blinking as if she hadn't heard right. "Ma'am, the quantum transmitter. Are you sure?" I'm sure, Elena said, her voice unwavering. There was another pause. Everyone on the bridge exchanged uncertain glances. In the 15 years since the station was established, the transmitter had never been used. It wasn't just a high-security device, it was a last resort. The kind of system you only activated if the worst-case scenario was not just possible, but inevitable. Chief Engineer Takashi Himura stepped forward, a hint of hesitation in his tone. "Commander, once that signal goes out, it triggers Earth's emergency protocols. You know what that means." Elena met his gaze. "Yes, I do," he nodded, understanding. "Very well. I'll ensure the core is stable during transmission." She gave him a grateful nod before turning back to the center of the room. The Voidborn weren't a new mystery. Human intelligence services had been monitoring them for years now, gathering what scraps of information they could. What little they'd learned painted a grim picture. A young but hyper-aggressive spacefaring species that viewed all other sentient life as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. 3 other alien civilizations had already fallen in the past decade. No warning, no diplomacy, no mercy. Just invasion, assimilation, extinction. And now, it was humanity's turn. Tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew moved efficiently, but there was a stiffness in their bodies, a weight in the air. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a simulation. This was real. The moment had finally come. Elena crossed to the command console, placed her palm on the biometric scanner, and waited. A moment later, a hidden compartment hissed open, revealing a compact black device with a red button protected by a clear safety cover. She flipped the cover back with a soft click. "Commander Elena Reyes, authorization. Sierra Echo November Tango India November Tango India November Echo Lima Alpha." The console emitted a soft chime of confirmation. "Protocol homeward bound initiated," the AI intoned. She took a slow breath, held it, and pressed the button. Deep within the station's core, the quantum transmitter began to hum a subtle, high-frequency vibration that resonated in the walls themselves. Unlike traditional communication methods that relied on electromagnetic or tachyon bursts, the quantum system used entangled particles to transmit data instantaneously across any distance. It was the crown jewel of human innovation, so rare and so secret that even the Galactic Conclave, the ruling body of known space, didn't know humanity possessed it. Vini's voice broke through the tension. Message sent. Earth has acknowledged receipt. Good, Elena said, turning back to her crew. Now we hold the line. That was the thing. They weren't meant to survive. Everyone here knew it. Frontier Station didn't have weaponized hull plating or planetary-grade defenses. Its shields were second-rate, and its weapons amounted to little more than a handful of laser turrets and a magnetic pulse cannon that hadn't been fired in years. But that wasn't the point. Their job wasn't to win, it was to delay. Every minute they held out was another escape pod safely away, another life preserved. Another warning carried to another outpost. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the station diverted auxiliary power to defense systems. Along the curved viewports, rows of turret emplacements extended from their storage compartments, tracking empty space. Elena watched the sensor feed as the enemy fleet drew closer. They weren't trying to hide. 12 vessels, closing in fast. Their hulls were irregular and organic-looking, as if grown rather than built. A mottled green-gray surface that absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making them appear like shadows with mass. Visual contact in 30 seconds, Quain said. Elena exhaled and squared her shoulders. Let's meet our guests. The bridge view screen lit up with a panoramic view of space. The Voidborn fleet emerged from the darkness like sharks gliding through black water, silent, menacing, utterly without fear. And then something unexpected. They're hailing us, Leni said, her voice laced with disbelief. Elena's brows furrowed. Put them through. The screen flickered again, this time displaying the bridge of a Voidborn warship. The creature on the other side was nightmarish. Its face a monstrous hybrid part shark, part octopus with eyes set in armored ridges and a mouth rimmed with constantly moving tendrils. Its skin shimmered with a wet, metallic sheen under the alien lighting. Human outpost, the translator began, converting the Voidborn's guttural speech into cold, clipped English. You have been detected in Voidborn expansion territory. Surrender your facility and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Elena didn't flinch. This is Commander Elena Reyes of Frontier Station, she said clearly. We are a peaceful scientific installation operating in neutral space, as recognized by conclave boundary treaties. Your presence here, with warships, is an act of unprovoked aggression. The Voidborn commander's tentacles twitched, the ridges of its skull flexing in a motion that may have been amusement or contempt. The conclave's treaties are irrelevant. Your species is not worthy of recognition. Your technology is primitive, your numbers insignificant. You will be processed or eliminated. Elena leaned forward slightly. We reject your terms, and I suggest you reconsider your evaluation of humanity. We are neither as primitive nor as insignificant as you believe. The channel cut off. The screen returned to the sight of the fleet outside, still coming, still silent. Seconds later, the first wave of weapons fire hit. Shields at 70. Jen at tactical called out. They're testing us. Return fire, Elena ordered. All batteries, target their lead vessel. Make it count. The bridge shook as the station's weapons came to life. Laser batteries lanced out into the void, striking the closest enemy ship. The impact did minimal damage, but it was enough to trigger a response. The Voidborn fleet shifted formation, spreading out into a calculated assault pattern. Evacuation status, Elena barked. 42% of non-essentials away, came the reply from Maya at operations. Pod still launching. Next wave in 10 seconds. Another blast hit the station, stronger than the first. Lights flickered. A console sparked in the corner. The shields were losing integrity fast. Elena gripped the console, steadying herself. Just a little longer. She glanced at the countdown running silently in the corner of her HUD. 25 minutes, then 20, then 15. She could only hope someone was listening on the other end of the signal, and that Earth had been telling the truth about what they'd kept hidden all these years. The command deck of Frontier Station was in chaos. Sparks shot from overloaded conduits as another salvo slammed into the outer shield array, sending tremors through the station's superstructure. Commander Elena Reyes stood at the center of it all, gripping the edge of her console with white knuckles. Her voice was hoarse from shouting orders, her uniform damp with sweat. The steady rhythm of her heartbeat was no longer something she felt in her chest, it pounded in her ears like a drum of war. Shields at 40% and dropping fast, yelled Jen from tactical. Structural stress building across ring sections 3 and 5, someone else called out. A half-dozen escape pods had launched in the last minute. But it wasn't fast enough. The Voidborn ships were tightening their formation, targeting critical systems with ruthless precision. The sensor array had already been knocked out. A magnetic stabilizer on the main ring had failed. Half the station was operating on emergency backup power. And the worst part, the Void-born fleet was barely trying. The enemy was still holding most of its firepower in reserve. They weren't worried about the station fighting back, they were playing with their food. "Target their sensor array," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the noise. "Buy time." "Disrupt their coordination," trying, Jen said. "Our targeting's degraded. This last hit cooked a third of our systems." Switching to manual override, the next blast shook the bridge hard enough to throw an ensign to the floor. Lights flickered, and backup power rerouted from non-essentials to keep life support running. Elena glanced at the clock. 11 minutes since the Void-born opened fire. Nearly 60% of the civilian staff had escaped. Nearly. That meant dozens, maybe hundreds, were still on board. "Come on," she whispered under her breath. "Come on, Earth. I sent the damn signal. Where are you?" Then everything changed, Commander. Quain's voice cracked with urgency, picking up a distortion. 5,000 kilometers off port side. "What kind of distortion?" Elena snapped. "Localized spatial anomaly," he answered. "No known matching energy signature. I don't even know how to describe it. The stars are stretching." She moved to his station, eyes narrowing as she stared at the live feed. And he was right. Space wasn't supposed to move like that. It actually rippled like a calm lake disturbed by a sudden wind. A circle of pure distortion, at least 2 kilometers wide, shimmered into existence in the black void just beyond the station. The stars behind it twisted and warped, as if viewed through a lens of fluid glass. "What the hell is that?" Quain asked. Barely louder than a whisper, the bridge went dead silent. Out of the distortion, a shape emerged. First, just a sleek prow, black, reflective, silent. Then a hull bristling with weapon systems, none of which matched anything in the station's databanks. The vessel was massive, gliding through the anomaly like a predator slipping through dark water. Its hull was unmarred by registry tags, save for a single symbol painted in deep crimson across its side. A stylized lightning bolt bisecting a planetary ring. Quain's hands flew across the console. "It's identifying as Earth Fleet Vessel. If tag, Thunderbolt." There was a pause. "Earth Fleet?" Elena echoed. "That's not one of ours. Not publicly, anyway." Another distortion opened nearby, then another. 2 more ships followed the first, each larger and more menacing than the last. Their hulls were angular and elegant, built for war but designed with the same brutal aesthetic. Sleek black armor, no visible seams, and power signatures unlike anything Elena had ever seen. It was like watching a dream walk into reality, a war fleet pulled from classified files and paranoid fantasies. "The second ship is the Artemis," Leni reported, awe in her voice. "The third is registering as the Perseus. None of these are in the public registry," Jen muttered. "Because they were never meant to be," Elena said, more to herself than anyone else. And then the impossible happened. "Thunderbolt is hailing the Void-born fleet," Leni said. "Put it on speaker," Elena ordered. A new voice filled the bridge, calm, authoritative, almost cold in its clarity. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Earth Fleet ship Thunderbolt. You are engaging a human installation in violation of territorial sovereignty. Power down your weapons and withdraw immediately." The message wasn't shouted or desperate. It wasn't a plea. It was a declaration. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the Void-born commander responded. The translator rendered the alien's voice into a low, grating tone filled with disdain. "Unknown vessels. This sector has been claimed by Void-born expansion doctrine. Your primitive species has no authority to issue demands. Depart or be destroyed." Another silence followed. On the bridge of Frontier Station, No one dared breathe. "Very well," came Captain Chen's reply. "You have made your choice." What happened next barely made sense. The three human warships accelerated. Not gradually, not like normal vessels. They snapped forward, their engines flaring with blue-white light as they moved with speeds that mocked physics itself. Trails of gravitational distortion followed behind them, and they didn't fire conventional weapons. From the prow of the Thunderbolt, a pulse of compressed energy shot forth, something that didn't behave like a laser or plasma bolt. It bent space. It hit the Voidborn flagship dead on. And instead of exploding, the enemy ship collapsed. The hull folded inward like it had been gripped by an invisible fist. No fire, no debris, just a massive vessel crumpling like paper in slow motion, vanishing into itself with silent violence. Elena's crew could only watch in stunned disbelief. "Oh my God," Quain breathed. The Voidborn fleet tried to respond. Their formations broke as they turned their attention to the Thunderbolt and its escort. Coordinated beams of energy lanced toward the black warships from a dozen vectors, converging perfectly, and did nothing. The Thunderbolt didn't even move. The weapons impacted some kind of defensive field and energy barrier that absorbed the attacks with dazzling blue flashes and left the ship untouched. It was like watching arrows bounce off a tank. "They're toying with them," Jen said. "No," Elena corrected. "They're demonstrating." The human ships moved through the Voidborn formation with ruthless efficiency. Precision strikes disabled engines, cut power, and severed weapon systems with surgical grace. Within minutes, 8 of the 12 enemy vessels had been destroyed. 3 more were adrift, powerless. One attempted to flee, only to be intercepted by a single pulse from the Artemis, which severed its main drive in an instant. It was over. 12 ships had come to crush Frontier Station. None remained standing. "We're being hailed," Leany said, almost too softly to hear. "Put it through." The screen lit up with the face of Captain Marcus Chen, a man in his early 50s with gray-streaked hair and a sharp, composed expression. He looked every bit the image of a veteran commander, standing with poise in an unfamiliar black and silver uniform bearing insignia Elena didn't recognize. "Commander Reyes," he said with a nod of acknowledgement. "The Thunderbolt will be docking with your station in 15 minutes. We'll begin personnel extraction and assess damage control options. Your actions today saved lives. You held the line." "Well done. Thank you, sir," Elena said, struggling to find words. "But what is this ship? When did Earth develop this kind of tech?" Chen's expression didn't shift, but his eyes carried something behind them, a weight, a history. "That," he said, "is a long story. One the galaxy is about to learn." The observation deck of the FF's Thunderbolt offered a panoramic view of the battlefield, if it could still be called that. What remained of the Voidborn fleet now drifted in eerie silence, broken husks tumbling slowly through space like shattered bones of some massive beast. From this high vantage, the devastation was almost poetic, even beautiful in a morbid way. But for Commander Elena Reyes, there was no awe, just questions. She stood beside Captain Marcus Chen, watching as the last escape pods from Frontier Station were towed into the Thunderbolt's docking bay. Most of her crew had made it out. The damage to the station was extensive, but it was still intact, thanks to Chen's sudden and explosive intervention. And yet, her mind kept circling back to the same thought, the same haunting suspicion. This hadn't been a rescue, not really. This had been a message. She finally broke the silence. How long has Earth been hiding this kind of capability? Chen clasped his hands behind his back, his posture perfectly disciplined. "Since first contact," he said plainly. "Roughly 70 years ago." Elena blinked. 70 years? You're telling me we've had gravity-based weapons, warp field distortion drives, and shield tech capable of nullifying void-borne firepower since the first alien signal hit our telescopes? Chen nodded once. "More or less. That doesn't make sense," she said, shaking her head. "Back then we were still fighting over Mars colonization rights and arguing about orbital launch costs. Our public tech barely made interstellar travel possible." "Are you saying that was all for show?" "In part," Chen replied. "But it's more complicated than that. The technology didn't appear overnight. The foundations were already being laid in the early 21st century. Advances in quantum physics, breakthroughs in unified field theory, experimental energy systems. The general population never saw the applications because they were classified before they could hit the civilian sector." Elena turned to face him fully, folding her arms. "You're telling me the public history books are fake?" "They're sanitized," Chen said. "Let me put it this way. The story the world tells itself is one of slow, painful progress, always just short of a breakthrough. In truth, we passed several key thresholds decades before we claimed we did. The reason no one knew? Strategic discretion." She narrowed her eyes. "Strategic discretion?" Chen stepped away from the window, motioning for her to follow. "Come with me." He led her down a corridor lined with smooth black panels, illuminated by recessed lighting that pulsed softly in time with the ship's core. There were no labels, no signs, no decorative emblems. Everything about the Thunderbolt's interior was purposeful, efficient, stark, and quiet. After we intercepted the first alien transmission, Earth's leadership had a choice to make, Chen said as they walked. "We didn't know what we were dealing with. All we knew was that something else was out there. Something older, potentially hostile. So a decision was made by a group that operated beyond the boundaries of any one government, a decision to conceal our rapid progress, and instead present humanity to the galaxy as a curious, struggling species still taking its first steps." "Why?" Elena asked. "Why pretend to be weak? To buy time," Chen said simply. "If the galaxy saw us as a non-threat, they wouldn't come knocking. They'd leave us alone. And we needed that time to understand the political landscape out there. Time to adapt. Time to build something that could hold its own if things went sideways." They stopped at a large door. Chen pressed his palm to a biometric pad. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a massive tactical display, an interactive map of known space. Hundreds of colored dots blinked across it, with subtle lines tracing paths between them. Some blinked green, others red, and a growing number were marked with a new symbol: the lightning bolt of Earth's silent fleet. "This is real-time positioning data for our fleet," Chen said. "You're seeing all of it, not just the Thunderbolt, Artemis, and Perseus. We have ships spread across over 40 systems, embedded in outposts shadowing trade lanes, hiding in asteroid belts. The silent fleet wasn't created overnight. It's been growing for decades in secret." Elena stared at the display, unable to speak for several long seconds. "How did no one know?" "Because we didn't build these ships in Earth orbit," Chen said. "We built them in the shadows of the outer solar system, on moons of Neptune and Pluto, in the Kuiper Belt. Facilities so well hidden, so far off the books, not even the UNAF's own space budget could trace them." She looked back at him. "Why tell me this now?" "Because now you're a part of it," he replied. "You sent the signal, you triggered the contingency. You started something we've spent half a century preparing for. Whether you realize it or not, Commander Reyes." You've just become part of history." A young lieutenant entered, holding a sleek data tablet. "Captain," he said, handing it over. "Confirmation just came through. The Voidborn have sent a distress call. Their home fleet is mobilizing." Chen took the tablet, scanned it briefly, and nodded. "Expected," he said. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Expected?" Chen turned back to the tactical display and tapped a command. Dozens of new icons flared to life. Earth's fleet vessels, some larger than the Thunderbolt, began moving across the map in coordinated vectors. "What you saw at Frontier Station wasn't just a rescue mission," he said. "It was Phase 1. Elena took a step back, her voice cautious. "Phase 1 of what?" "Operation Aegis," he answered. "We've been tracking the Voidborn for years, watching as they absorbed or destroyed 17 other civilizations. They're not conquerors. They're exterminators. And according to intelligence gathered by embedded scouts and long-range probes, humanity was next. Your station was their first move." He turned to her with calm finality in his eyes. "Our response wasn't a defense. It was a declaration. The time for hiding is over. The Silent Fleet is now active. Public, operative. IAML. Simultaneously with our action at Frontier Station, other ships are emerging across the galaxy to secure human assets, protect allies, and disrupt Voidborn positions." Elena took a breath and looked at the map again. It wasn't just a defensive network, it was a web. Coordinated, global, galactic. Dozens of fleet movements perfectly timed, reaching into regions of space humanity supposedly hadn't even explored. "This is going to cause a stir," she said. "The Conclave is going to lose its mind." Chen didn't smile, but his eyes narrowed in acknowledgement. "Yes, at first, they'll treat it as an act of aggression. But that's only because they won't understand. Not yet. And when they do, they'll realize we did what they wouldn't," he said. "We protected what they were willing to sacrifice." There was a long silence between them. Eventually, Elena asked, "And if they don't accept that explanation?" Chen tapped the side of the display. "Then they'll have to accept something else. Reality." The map zoomed out one more level, showing humanity's total influence range. What had once been a small bubble along the outer edge of known space now flared outward, an expanding sphere of influence backlit by power. "We didn't want this," he said quietly. "We never wanted to become galactic enforcers, but you've seen the Voidborn. You know what they do to developing civilizations. We couldn't stay silent forever. Eventually, someone had to step forward. And when no one else would, we did." He stepped away, allowing her to take it all in. For Elena, the last few hours had been a lifetime. She'd gone from commanding an underfunded outpost to standing on the bridge of the most advanced warship humanity had ever created, witnessing the unfolding of a plan that rewrote everything she thought she knew about Earth's place in the universe. She turned slowly toward him. "What happens now?" Chen met her gaze. "Now, we head to Conclave Station. We show them what humanity has become, and after that," Chen looked out through the viewports past the graveyard of enemy ships and toward the stars beyond. "Then we get to work, protecting those who need it, reshaping the balance, making sure the mistakes of the past don't happen again." A pause. Then, softly, he added, "We hid because we were afraid of what we'd find. But now that we know the truth, we can't look away." Elena stood beside him in silence, letting the weight of his words settle around her. In that moment, she understood. The veil was lifted. The galaxy had just seen the tip of humanity's true power, and nothing would ever be the same again. The F's Thunderbolt hummed with activity as its engines powered down, locking into high orbit above Conclave Station. Through the reinforced viewing panels along its port side, Commander Elena Reyes could see the sprawling galactic hub, an enormous ring-shaped structure suspended in the void like a cosmic crown. Thousands of vessels from dozens of species floated nearby, their colors and hulls showcasing centuries of architectural divergence. But now, something new had arrived among them, something that changed everything. 5 other Earth fleet ships had already taken up positions around the station, ships the galaxy had never seen before. The F's Vigilant, EF's Horizon, EF's Argent, and 2 others that, like the Thunderbolt, bore no visible registration other than the crimson lightning bolt insignia now proudly glowing on their hulls. Unlike most diplomatic vessels, these were not painted in hopeful whites or adorned with banners of peace. These were matte black warships, sleek, angular, and unapologetically dangerous. Elena stood just behind Captain Marcus Chen in the Thunderbolt's command bay, watching as the diplomatic shuttle prepped for launch. She turned to him. "They're scared." Chen didn't respond immediately. He followed her gaze through the viewport, noting the way smaller alien ships began to subtly reposition, clearing space around the new arrivals. It wasn't panic exactly, but it was the closest thing to it in a place like this. Power responded to power, and Earth's sudden and undeniable presence had just sent a seismic wave through the entire sector. "They should be," Chen said quietly. The shuttle doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, and a team of Earth's diplomatic corps stepped aboard dressed in tailored blue robes, in stark contrast to the military blacks worn by Earth fleet officers. At the head of the delegation was Ambassador Sarah Chen, no relation to the captain, though Elena had learned that fact only hours earlier. "You ready for this?" Chen asked her. Elena gave him a half smile. "Yesterday I was coordinating fuel resupply schedules and reviewing telescope logs. Today I'm walking into a political hornet's nest. So, no, but I'll manage." "Good answer," Chen said. The shuttle detached smoothly and glided toward the station's docking ring. As it drew closer, they could already see small groups of delegates gathering behind the wide, translucent windows, figures from across the galaxy who had come to observe this moment. Some were curious, others clearly hostile, but all were watching. Earth had just stepped out of the shadows, and the entire galaxy had taken notice. Back on the Thunderbolt, fleet coordination was already in motion. A dozen consoles throughout the ship's command center were manned by officers coordinating synchronized operations. Tactical Analyst Lieutenant Raina Tsang was managing one of the largest screens, her eyes tracking colored vectors that stretched across 4 sectors. "All Phase 1 deployments have gone active," she reported aloud. 37 silent fleet vessels across 16 star systems are now in position. Intercepts, blockades, and active defense maneuvers proceeding as planned. Captain Chen moved to her station, observing the map. Each green dot represented an Earth fleet ship that had just emerged from cloak or anomaly drive concealment. In the past 2 hours, ships had decloaked near resource colonies in the Outer Rim, in orbit of embattled ally worlds, and at the fringes of systems long believed to be abandoned. "Any resistance?" he asked. "Some minor skirmishes in the Kessler Line," she replied. "One of our ship's F's Halberd is holding position against 3 Voidborn vessels that attempted a surprise ambush. They're requesting permission to engage." Chen pressed his calm, "Permission granted. Tell them, precision strikes only. Minimize collateral." "Yes, sir." Elena looked over the display. "You launched all of this the moment you responded to our signal?" "No," Chen said. "We launched it 30 seconds before." She stared at him. "Why before?" "Because we already knew," he said. "Intelligence confirmed the Voidborn fleet's approach patterns 2 days ago. When your signal came through, it simply activated the public phase. Everything before this was covert. Chen nodded. The Silent Fleet wasn't just hiding from the Conclave. It was hiding from everyone, including most of our own people. Only a small segment of Earth's Defense Council even had clearance to see the full project. Elena shook her head in disbelief. So while we were petitioning for better sensors, negotiating with Conclave trade reps, and begging for defensive upgrades, this whole network was already moving in the dark. Correct. A tactical officer stepped over, handing Chen a new data pad. Confirmed target suppression across all primary engagement zones, she said. Void-borne supply corridors in Delta 4 and Ashari Prime have been neutralized. Forward surveillance from the Argent confirms no remaining hostile activity in the Nalari Pass. We've effectively crippled their outer fleet capacity. Chen reviewed the report, then turned to Elena. What you're seeing here is the opening move in a very long game, he said. We're not just reacting, we're reshaping the board. Elena folded her arms. Won't the Conclave see this as Earth declaring war? Not war, Chen said. Dominance, but not in the way they fear. The Thunderbolt's main display flickered again. This time it showed a split screen, multiple views from across the galaxy, relayed by Earth fleet surveillance drones. On one side, an Earth vessel deploying drone shield generators around a damaged station belonging to the Terrini, a neutral species recently targeted by the Voidborn. On another, Earth's Marines escorting civilian colonists out of the ruins of a shattered mining colony in the Sail Belt. In every feed, Earth wasn't conquering, they were protecting. 17 civilizations, Chen said. That's how many the Voidborn have annihilated in the last century. All of them appealed to the Conclave for help. None of them received more than a warning notice and token condemnation. Our intelligence confirmed it again and again. The Conclave won't act unless it affects their balance sheets. Elena frowned. And Earth? We decided not to wait for that to happen to us. Elena looked again at the screen. Human soldiers helping alien children onto medical ships. Engineers deploying repair stations in orbit of broken worlds. In another scene, a Voidborn strike cruiser was being towed disabled and intact for study. She turned back to Chen. So this is it? Humanity steps up and says, "We're the Guardians now." No, Chen said. We say, never again. Never again will a rising civilization be slaughtered in silence. Never again will the powerful pretend they didn't see the signs. We don't seek control, but if no one else will stop monsters like the Voidborn, then we will. New voice crackled over the internal comm. Captain, transmission from Earth Command. They've authorized Phase 2 initiation pending Conclave response. Understood, Chen said. Hold Phase 2 until we finish this summit. Yes, sir, Elena's brow furrowed. Phase 2, Chen raised an eyebrow. You'll find out soon enough. Just then, a message pinged on the primary screen. Incoming transmission diplomatic shuttle report secure dock. Ambassador Chen is ready to address the chamber. Elena exhaled slowly. Let's see how this plays out. As the Conclave assembly began aboard the station, Earth's ambassador stepped onto the central platform with calm, collected precision. Her voice, relayed back to the Thunderbolt, rang clear across the chamber. Esteemed delegates of the Galactic Conclave, she began. Today we do not come to boast or to threaten. We come because we must. The Voidborn have committed atrocities unchecked. 17 intelligent species gone. Entire systems turned to graveyards. And what did your laws do? What did your treaties protect? Murmurs filled the chamber. You call us liars, she continued. You say Earth is primitive, unworthy, reckless. And yet, here we are. When your diplomacy failed, when your warnings were ignored, when your silence became complicity, we stood up. The diplomatic team activated holograms across the chamber, displaying scenes of void-born destruction. Elena had seen them before, but now they weren't just warnings, they were evidence. And they came with Earth's promise, never again. Back on the Thunderbolt, Elena turned toward Chen. This is going to change everything, she said. Chen nodded slowly. Yes, and it's just beginning. The Grand Assembly Chamber of Conclave Station hadn't seen this kind of attendance in centuries. From every corner of the known galaxy, delegates arrived. Frigates and shuttles packed the outer docking rings. Ornate cruisers with streaming banners and intricate hull etchings shared space with spindly skimmers and hulking organic carriers. Inside the vast ringed amphitheater of the chamber itself, the mood was electric, equal parts confusion, outrage, and something else even more unsettling. For decades, Earth's delegation had been a quiet presence here, one of the youngest species with an active seat. Humanity had been tolerated more than welcomed, often relegated to the back rows, their motions dismissed, their warnings politely ignored. But today, everything was different. Commander Elena Reyes stood behind the glass wall of the human delegation's new booth, relocated with some diplomatic scrambling to the inner circle of the chamber. It was an unspoken recognition of the shift in power. Earth was no longer an afterthought. It was the reason the assembly had been called into emergency session, and everyone knew it. The murmurs started even before the session officially began. Across the chamber, the Void-born delegation arrived. Their representative, an admiral whose name Elena hadn't bothered to memorize, slithered to their post. Like all Void-born, the creature had tentacles coiled beneath its sleek armored torso, with facial appendages that pulsed in eerie rhythm as it surveyed the crowd. Its presence sent an unmistakable chill through the room, even among species unfamiliar with direct Void-born aggression. When the Azarin moderator, a crystalline being of shimmering, faceted limbs, called the chamber to order, a dozen translation feeds clicked online. The conclave recognizes the representative of the Void-born sovereignty, the moderator intoned. The Void-born admiral's voice came through the chamber's speaker system, in sharp, cutting tones translated with a mechanical neutrality that stripped none of the venom from its words. This emergency session has been called under false pretenses. The human species has launched coordinated attacks across Void-born-held territories, destroyed sovereign assets, and violated interstellar protocols. This is an act of unprovoked war, carried out through deception and technological concealment. We demand sanctions and immediate punitive action. Whispers erupted around the chamber. Some delegates looked to one another in shock. Others stared coldly at the human delegation. A few, Elena noted with surprise, looked hopeful. The Azarin moderator tilted their crystalline head. Earth's representative will respond. Ambassador Sarah Chen rose from her seat, her motion fluid and composed. She wore a diplomat's robes of deep blue, embroidered with Earth's new lightning bolt insignia. Her hair was pulled back into a tight braid, and her face bore the calm of a woman who knew exactly what she was walking into and had planned her counterstrike down to the second. She stepped onto the central platform with measured pace. When she spoke, her voice carried across the amphitheater, bolstered not by volume, but by clarity. "Honored delegates," she began. "Earth did not come to this chamber seeking conflict. But we did come seeking truth." That line, plain and unadorned, cut through the murmurs like a blade. We have listened for decades as the Conclave offered promises of peace and protection, she continued. We've watched as young species, newly risen to the stars, sought refuge in these halls, only to be ignored as they were consumed. We have waited for justice, and we have waited in vain, the Voidborn Admiral hissed, its appendages flaring. Lies. Ambassador Chen didn't even look in its direction. 3 months ago, the Atarixi sent a distress call from their outer colonies. Not one Conclave vessel responded. 5 months before that, the Gavari requested defense support. It was tabled indefinitely. The Taresh, the Helbrin, the Sayari all gone. 17 species erased from the stars in less than a century. As she spoke, the chamber lights dimmed slightly, and a series of holograms appeared above her. They showed worlds burning, colonies falling, alien cities reduced to rubble and ash. In some images, Voidborn ships could be seen descending into orbit graceful and terrible, leaving nothing but silence behind. The delegates were no longer murmuring. They were watching. We know what the Voidborn have done, Chen said, because we have the evidence, because we have been watching, and because, unlike this chamber, we were prepared to act. The Voidborn Admiral surged forward, but the chamber's protective field held it back. Its translator snapped. This is fabrication. Propaganda. You violated our space. Chen turned finally and locked eyes with the alien through the holofield. We violated no treaties. We responded to an unprovoked attack on Frontier Station, an outpost operating within neutral space, as recognized by Conclave boundaries. Your fleet entered that space without diplomatic clearance. You fired the first shot. Humanity answered it. She stepped aside, and the holograms shifted again. This time, they showed the initial battle, the Voidborn ships approaching, their weapons igniting, the Thunderbolt arriving, the Artemis and Perseus flanking in formation. And then, the footage of Earth's precision strikes, flashes of blue-white energy curling space around Voidborn vessels until they simply ceased to exist. It wasn't a boast. It was a warning. We have been accused of deception, Chen said, pacing slowly across the central dais. And yes, we concealed our true capabilities, not to prepare for conquest, but to survive. We knew how this galaxy treats its newcomers, how power is hoarded, how diplomacy is a game for the entrenched and indifferent. We hid our strength because we saw what happened to those who revealed it too early. The chamber remained silent. Chen stopped in the center of the dais and looked upward, addressing every tier of the assembly. But we are not hiding anymore. The gram appeared, an updated galactic map. Earthfleet vessels were displayed across it, stationed near colonies and species that had once stood alone. Each dot now represented more than power, it represented presence, support, defense. Earth has deployed peacekeeping forces in over 30 systems, Chen said. We have engaged Voidborn ships only in response to aggression. We have shielded refugees, stabilized conflict zones, and coordinated aid missions with willing partners. We are not conquerors. We are guardians. The Azarin moderator's form pulsed gently. Ambassador Chen, while this evidence is compelling, the Conclave cannot permit any single species to assume the role of unilateral enforcer. Such authority must be approved by this assembly. Chen nodded. With all due respect, moderator, that is a discussion we are willing to have. But I must ask this body one simple question first. If not us, then who? The silence that followed was profound. No one answered. Not the Tavari, whose fleets had grown fat on defense contracts. Not the Ulnari, who preferred neutrality over involvement. Not even the Elari, whose cultural superiority often placed them above galactic conflict. The chamber was filled with power but no will. Chen stepped down from the dais, returning to Earth's delegation booth. As she passed Elena, their eyes met briefly. "Elena," she said, nodding once. "Thank you for holding the line." Elena felt her throat tighten. "You gave us a reason to hold it." A few seats down, Captain Chen stood from the shadows and joined them. The moderator called for deliberation. Within an hour, the verdict came. The conclave grudgingly, cautiously acknowledged Earth's evidence. Sanctions were levied against the Voidborn. Investigations were launched. And most surprisingly of all, a new entity was formed. The Interstellar Protection Accord, a council empowered to intervene in acts of systemic annihilation or predatory conquest. Earth was named a founding member, and Thessalant Fleet was no longer silent. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind wasn't peace. Not yet. From the wide windows of the Thunderbolt's observation deck, Commander Elena Reyes stood staring into the endless black, her thoughts running just as deep. The stars beyond shimmered faintly, cold and indifferent as always. The debris of the broken Voidborn fleet had long since been cleared. The firestorms of orbital battle now a memory. But down below, on Conclave Station, the ripples of that battle were still being felt. Across the galaxy, entire civilizations were trying to grasp what had just happened. Earth's long dismissed, long ignored, had pulled back the curtain. And behind it wasn't a hopeful species fumbling its way through the dark. Behind it was power, strategy, resolve, and something else too. Conviction. Behind her, the doors hissed open, and the familiar sound of Captain Marcus Chen's footsteps echoed softly across the polished floor. "I figured I'd find you up here," he said. "I needed a minute," Elena replied, not taking her eyes off the stars. "To breathe." Chen moved to stand beside her, folding his hands behind his back. "It's strange," she said after a pause. "You spend your whole career believing your world is one thing, that we're still catching up, that everyone out there knows more, has more, is more. And then, one transmission, one battle, one day, and the whole board shifts." Chen gave a quiet nod. "You see the truth of it now." She turned to face him. "The truth is heavy. It always is," he said. They stood in silence for a moment longer, watching as a shuttle departed from the docking ring below. It was carrying the first diplomatic outreach team to the Auran Syndicate, one of the fringe civilizations that had just formally requested Earth fleet protection. It wouldn't be the last. In the last 24 hours alone, 9 independent species had sent diplomatic envoys to Earth. They were no longer asking if humanity belonged in the galactic conversation. They were asking where to stand in line, back aboard the Thunderbolt's main command deck. The crew was still processing the new normal. Messages from every corner of the galaxy streamed in, some offering cautious support, others laced with veiled threats, and many more filled with a desperate, frightened hope. Hope that Earth's rise meant safety. Hope that maybe, this time, someone would stand between them and the monsters. When the Conclave's resolution had passed formally acknowledging the atrocities committed by the Voidborn, imposing sanctions and granting emergency authority to the newly formed Interstellar Protection Accord, the chamber hadn't erupted in applause. There was no cheering, no backslapping. There was only quiet, the quiet of survival, the quiet of realization, and perhaps, in some of them, the quiet of guilt. The Thunderbolt's conference room was smaller than expected. No vast halls, no sweeping ceilings, just a sleek table of carbon steel, matte black chairs, and a wall-mounted tactical map quietly updating itself. Elena sat at the far end, reviewing her new orders. Effective immediately, she had been assigned as liaison officer to the Protective Council, the first representative from Earthfleet to serve in a cross-species command structure. She would be coordinating planetary defense logistics, working with emergent civilizations, and perhaps most importantly, sharing everything she had learned in her time watching the stars from Frontier Station. She was no longer an observer. Now she was part of the action. Chen stepped inside, nodding at the officers in the room, and handed her a small datapad. "We received this a few minutes ago," he said, "from Earth Command." Elena activated the display. A recorded message began to play. Admiral Harris, calm and direct as ever, appeared in the projection. "Commander Reyes," she said, "on behalf of Earth's High Council and the Defense Advisory Board, I want to commend your bravery, initiative, and leadership. Your decision to activate the distress beacon triggered the most coordinated deployment in our history and, more importantly, saved lives." The image flickered briefly, then stabilized. "The Council has voted unanimously to place you in charge of forward relations between the Silent Fleet and newly contacted civilizations. You've earned it, and we need leaders like you now more than ever." The recording ended. Elena blinked slowly, still absorbing the words. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a responsibility unlike any she'd imagined. Chen gave her a look. "Still feel like the woman watching telescopes and running crew schedules?" She smiled faintly. "Not quite." But her thoughts weren't on the title, or the logistics, or the new seat at the table. They were on the Void-born children, the ones their forces had found clinging to life aboard a drifting support vessel during cleanup operations. Malnourished, sick, alone. Not warriors, just survivors. No one had expected it, not even Earth's analysts. For all their monstrous aggression, the Void-born had once been a people too. Maybe not so different once from humanity. Maybe they'd simply lost their way, driven by fear, by scarcity, by a history no one else had taken the time to understand. That was the real danger. Not war, not destruction, but apathy, indifference. The ease of pretending someone else will handle the darkness. Later that night, standing alone in the docking corridor, Elena looked out at the stars one last time before departure. She thought of her crew, her station, the fear in their eyes, and the courage that had risen to meet it. She thought of the Thunderbolt, of its impossible weapons and silent engines, and of how long her species had hidden in the shadows, growing, learning, waiting. She thought of the Conclave, and all the species who had sat idly while whole civilizations vanished into the void. And she thought of Earth, not just the planet, but the people. Flawed, stubborn, impulsive, but also adaptable, resilient, protective in a way that others had never quite understood. Not because they wanted to conquer, but because deep down they remembered what it was like to be small, to be overlooked, to be prey. She remembered something her mother used to say, something simple, passed down through generations. When the wolves circle the village, you don't wait for permission to build a wall. Now, humanity had become that wall. A bastion in the stars. And as daunting as that sounded, Elena wasn't afraid. Because someone had to stand up. Someone always had to be first. Epilogue: in the days that followed, the galaxy began to realign. Some welcomed the change, some resented it. Some feared what humanity might do with such power. But no one could deny the reality anymore. The Silent Fleet was real. Earth had arrived, and with it came a promise not of domination, but of protection. a promise that no cry for help would be ignored, that no fledgling civilization would be left to the void. And perhaps that promise, more than the weapons, more than the ships, was the most dangerous weapon of all: hope. Final reflection. A lesson for us all. What began as a science fiction story of hidden fleets and alien invasions is, at its heart, a reflection of something deeply human. In every age, there comes a time when a group, a people, or even a single voice must choose between silence and action, between comfort and sacrifice, between standing by and standing up. Humanity's rise in this story wasn't just about ships or tech. It was about vision, about recognizing injustice, not just as a distant tragedy, but as a call to action. In our world, that doesn't always involve war or galaxies. Sometimes it means speaking out when no one else will, protecting those who can't protect themselves, risking comfort to do what's right, because power isn't just about force. It's about what you choose to do with it. And sometimes the most heroic thing anyone can do is answer the call.